My name is Margaret, and I was born and raised in a small town in Michigan, where winters were long and cold, but summers were filled with the smell of lilacs and the sound of children playing in the yard. And if I close my eyes, I can still hear the creak of my old wooden rocking chair on the porch, swaying gently as I sat there with a cup of tea and watched the world go by. But now that chair is gone, taken away by someone who thought it was just an old piece of furniture, not realizing that it held years of my life, years of rocking babies to sleep, of waiting for my husband to come home from work, of sitting there late into the night when I couldn't sleep and found comfort in its rhythm. And though they carried it away, thinking they were emptying out clutter, they could never take away the memories tied to it, because those live inside me and come back as strong as ever every time I think of that chair. And maybe I should start by telling you how that chair came into my life in the first place, because it wasn't just bought from a store like a regular chair. No, it was a gift, a wedding present for my parents when I married Henry, my husband, the man I loved more than anything in the world. And my father built it with his own 2 hands in his little workshop behind our farmhouse, sanding down the wood until it was smooth as glass, carefully shaping the arms and the slats. And when he placed it in front of me on the morning after my wedding, he said, "Every mother needs a good rocking chair, and every home needs a place for peace." And I didn't quite understand the depth of those words back then. But over the years I came to realize he was right, because that chair wasn't just furniture, it was a piece of our home, a place where so many of life's moments happened, where I held my firstborn daughter, wrapped in a quilt my mother stitched by hand, her tiny body nestled against my chest as I rocked her to sleep. And later, when my son came along, I remember long nights with fevers and cries, when the only thing that calmed him was being rocked in that chair, the creaking sound becoming like a lullaby to him. And even when they grew older, I would sit in that chair on stormy nights, waiting for them to come home from school dances or football games, my heart only settling once I saw the headlights of their car in the driveway. And then there were the evenings when Henry and I would sit on the porch together, me in the rocking chair and him in the swing beside me, talking about our day, laughing about little things, or sometimes sitting in silence, watching fireflies blink in the yard. And I remember how his hand would reach over and rest on mine. No words needed, because the chair itself seemed to hold our conversations, our silences, our love. And even when he passed away many years later and the house felt so empty, I still had that chair, and I would sit in it with a blanket draped over me, close my eyes and feel him near as, though the rhythm of the rocking carried his presence back to me, soothing me when grief felt too heavy. So you see, that chair wasn't just wood and nails, it was a witness to my whole life. But as the years went on, my children grew up, moved away, started families of their own, and I was left with more space in the house than I needed. And they started saying things like, "Mom, you should downsize. It's too much house for you to handle." And I suppose they were right, because the stairs got harder for my knees, and the garden I used to love became too much to care for. And one day they decided it was time for me to move into a smaller place, an apartment in town, closer to the doctor and closer to them. And I agreed, though not without sadness, because how do you pack up a lifetime into boxes and decide what to keep and what to let go? But the hardest part wasn't what I expected. It wasn't giving up the dining table or the big bed. It was when I realized that in all the packing and sorting, they had taken the rocking chair, loaded it onto the moving truck, and told me it wasn't needed anymore, that it was too old, too worn out, that it wouldn't fit in the apartment. And I remember standing there, watching them carry it away, and I wanted to shout, "Stop, that chair is my life, you can't take it." But the words never came out, I just swallowed them, because sometimes mothers stay quiet to keep peace, even when their hearts are breaking. And so the chair left my sight that day. But what they didn't know was that my memory stayed, every single one of them, etched deep in my heart, and even now, sitting in this little apartment with plain new furniture. I can close my eyes and hear the gentle creak of wood, the echo of baby's laughter, Henry's voice beside me, the wind of Michigan summers rustling the trees as I rocked, and I realized that they may have taken my rocking chair, but they could never take my memories, and in some ways, maybe that's the most important part of the story, because wood can break, fabric can tear, but memories live as long as we hold them close. And I will hold mine for as long as I can, because that's what keeps me warm when the nights feel too quiet. When I think back to those first years with the rocking chair, I can almost smell the faint scent of fresh wood and varnish, because it was still so new then, placed right by the big front window of our little house, where the sunlight streamed in and warmed the floorboards, and it quickly became my favorite spot, especially after I had my first daughter, Mary, who came into the world on a snowy evening in January. And I remember how frightened I was as a young mother, not knowing if I would be enough for her, if I could give her all that she needed. But the moment I sat in that chair with her bundled tightly in my arms and I began to rock, something inside me softened, like the chair itself whispered, "You can do this." And slowly, with every creak back and forth, I found a rhythm, not just for the chair, but for my life as a mother. And it was in that very spot that I sang her lullabies my mother once sang to me, rocking through the nights while snow tapped softly against the window. And though I was exhausted most of the time, I look back now and realize those were some of the most sacred hours of my life, because in the quiet darkness, it was just me, my baby, and that old chair holding us steady. And a few years later, when my son David was born, the chair took on a whole new purpose, because unlike Mary, he was a restless little one, colicky and fussy, and the only thing that seemed to soothe him was motion. So I would walk the floors until my legs ached, then finally collapse into the chair, rocking and humming, praying his cries would ease, and more often than not, they did, his tiny head resting against my chest as the chair swayed us both into calmness. And sometimes, when he finally drifted into sleep, I would keep rocking long after he closed his eyes, because I found the movement comforted me just as much as it did him, like the chair was absorbing my worries and handing me back peace. And I can recall countless nights where Henry would come home late from the factory, his clothes smelling of oil and steel, and he'd find me in that chair, hair messy, baby in my arms, and he would kneel beside us, kiss my forehead, and whisper, "You're doing a wonderful job, Maggie." And though I rarely believed it in the moment, his words, combined with the rhythm of the rocking, gave me the strength to keep going, and the chair became almost like a member of the family, always present, always reliable, always there through the small storms and the big ones. And it wasn't just for the babies either, because as Mary and David grew, the chair grew with us, becoming the place where scraped knees were comforted, where bedtime stories were read, where tears were dried after arguments or heartbreaks, and even Henry claimed it sometimes, especially on Sunday afternoons, when he would sit in it with the newspaper while the children played on the rug, and I would watch him, smiling at how small he looked in that chair with his long legs sticking out, and yet how perfectly he fit in our lives. And there were summer evenings when the heat made it hard to sleep, and I'd carry the chair out onto the porch so I could rock under the stars, the air filled with the chirping of crickets, the scent of freshly cut grass drifting in, and often Henry would join me, bringing 2 cups of coffee, one for him and one for me, though mine would go cold because I preferred to just hold it and breathe in the night air. And we would sit there for hours talking about the children's futures, about bills, about hopes, about nothing at all, and sometimes about dreams we never quite chased but liked to imagine anyway, and all of it seemed to sink into the wood of that chair, as if it was recording our voices for safekeeping. And I remember one particular summer storm when lightning flashed across the sky and the power went out, leaving us in darkness, the children scared and clinging to us. And I sat in that chair with both of them squeezed onto my lap, rocking them while Henry lit candles, and though thunder rattled the windows, they calmed down, because the chair seemed to promise safety, and I've always thought there's something almost magical about the way rocking can soothe fear, as though it tricks the heart into believing everything will be all right, and maybe it does, because more than once it worked for me too, in times when money was tight, or Henry's job felt uncertain, or my own heart was heavy with worry. I would sit in that chair, when everyone else was asleep, wrap a shawl around my shoulders and rock, letting the chair carry me through the silence until morning came. And that's why, when I think of the memories attached to it, I don't just see a piece of furniture. I see a partner, a quiet companion through every season of life, from babies to teenagers to grown children. And I sometimes wonder if my children even realize how many of their tears were caught in that chair, how many of their giggles bounced off its arms, how many of their secrets were whispered while leaning against me as I rocked, because it wasn't just my chair, it was their chair too, and perhaps that's why losing it stings so much now, because in taking it away, they unknowingly took away a symbol of their own childhoods. Though they don't see it that way, but even if they don't, I do, and that's enough, because I can close my eyes right now and still hear the laughter of Mary chasing David through the living room, both of them tumbling onto the rug in a heap, me calling out for them to settle down. And then later, one of them climbing into my lap in that chair, demanding a story, and before I knew it, we were rocking together again, another memory etched deep into the grain of the wood. And sometimes, when the ache of missing the chair grows heavy, I remind myself that while the wood is gone, the memories are mine forever, tucked safely inside me, where no moving truck can ever reach. As the years rolled on and my babies grew into teenagers, the rocking chair took on a new meaning, no longer just a cradle for sleepyheads or a stage for bedtime stories, but a place of waiting, of worrying, of sitting through the silence of nights when my heart refused to rest until I heard the sound of footsteps at the door, and I often think those were the years when the chair earned its deepest grooves, not from the weight of little bodies in my lap, but from the restless rocking of a mother who could not settle until her children were home safe, because teenage years come with a different kind of sleeplessness. Not the cries of infants, but the anxious prayers of a mother hoping her children would make the right choices. And I remember many Friday nights when Mary was out at a school dance, and I would sit in that chair by the front window, the lamp casting a small circle of light, listening to the wind against the glass, while my mind spun circles of worry. Would she be careful? Was the boy she liked trustworthy? Would she come home smiling or in tears? And the only thing that seemed to keep me steady was the gentle back and forth of the rocking, the creak filling the quiet house like a heartbeat, and when headlights finally swept across the driveway and the door opened to reveal her flushed face, whether from joy or disappointment, I was there in that chair, ready to listen, to comfort, to simply be present, and she would sit on the arm of the chair, sometimes leaning her head on my shoulder, and spill out her little heartbreaks or excitement, and I would smooth her hair the way I had since she was a baby, all while the chair kept moving, steady and patient, and when David grew older, the chair became my refuge once more, especially during football season, when he would be out late at practice or games, and I would rock as I waited for the rumble of the team bus, my stomach twisting with every minute he was late, and sometimes he came home, bruised or limping, trying to act tough, but he always ended up near me and that chair, letting me fuss over him with ice packs and gentle scolding, and though he rolled his eyes, I knew he found comfort in the routine of sitting close while the chair swayed, reminding him he was still my boy, no matter how tall he grew, and there were other nights, harder nights, when tempers flared, as they often do with teenagers, voices raised and doors slammed, and I would retreat to the chair, rocking in. The aftermath of arguments, letting the rhythm smooth out my anger before it turned into words I might regret, and sometimes, after things cooled down, one of them would appear, sheepish and quiet, and perch on the arm or the floor beside me, and together we'd talk or not talk. letting the chair fill the silence with forgiveness. And in those moments, I realized the chair was more than just comfort. It was a bridge between us, a place where pride softened and love found its way back, and Henry, too, knew the chair well during those years, because he often worked long hours and I'd be alone in the evenings, rocking with worry about bills or about the children's futures. And when he finally came home, tired and worn, he would sit beside me, sometimes taking the chair for himself just for a few minutes, leaning back with a sigh, and I remember how odd it felt to see him in it, because it always seemed like mine. Yet in those moments I understood he needed its comfort just as much as I did, and we would often end the night together, me in the chair, him on the couch, both of us dozing off mid-conversation, the hum of life carrying on around us, and I can still picture those evenings when storms rolled across the Michigan sky, thunder shaking the windows while Mary and David were out with friends, and I'd rock myself nearly dizzy, praying for their safety, promising God that if they just walked through that door, I'd never take them for granted, and every time they did come home, wet from rain or flushed from laughter, my heart swelled with gratitude. I never told them just how much those nights aged me, because mothers carry their worry quietly, pouring it into their prayers and their rocking chairs, and there were gentler moments, too, like warm summer nights when Mary would sit with me in the chair, both of us trying to cool off from the heat, talking about school, about her dreams of becoming a teacher, about the books she loved while fireflies blinked outside the window, and later, David would sprawl across the floor with his guitar, strumming clumsy notes while I rocked, the music mixing with the creak of the chair until the whole house felt wrapped in rhythm. And those sounds are etched in me forever, because they were the soundtrack of our lives, the little things that made our home feel alive. And now, sitting here in this small apartment, I sometimes close my eyes and imagine I'm back in that room, lamp glowing, children near, Henry breathing steady beside me, the chair moving back and forth as it always did, carrying me through joy and fear alike. And though my children may think the chair was just an old thing, too worn out to matter, they don't realize that it was there for every high and low of their growing years, the silent witness to their becoming, and to my becoming too, from a nervous young mother into a woman who weathered storms with love and patience. And I wonder if one day, when they are older and their children are grown, they'll look back and understand what that chair really meant, not just to me, but to all of us. The house grew quieter once the children left, and that rocking chair, which had once been filled with the weight of babies, toddlers, and restless teenagers, suddenly held only me, sitting in the stillness of evenings that seemed to stretch on longer than they ever had before. And I remember the ache of that emptiness, how the rooms that used to echo with laughter and arguments and footsteps now carried only silence. But the chair remained faithful, its creak keeping me company as I adjusted to this new chapter, and I would often sit in it by the front window, just as I had for years, watching cars pass by on the street and wondering where Mary and David were at that moment. Were they eating dinner? Were they safe? Did they ever think of me as much as I thought of them? And though letters and phone calls came now and then, the truth is a mother's arms always feel emptier than her heart, and so I leaned on that chair to soothe the ache, rocking through the hours when loneliness tried to swallow me, and Henry would sometimes join me on the porch after work, the two of us finding comfort in each other's presence, talking about how quickly time had gone, how one minute we were cradling babies and the next we were waving them off to lives of their own. And I think he felt that emptiness too, though he didn't say much, but I saw it in the way his eyes lingered on their empty seats at the dinner table. And in those years, the chair became more than just a mother's refuge. It became a place of memory, of reflection, of holding on to the past while trying to accept the present. And there were nights when I would sit wrapped in a quilt, closing my eyes and letting memories wash over me, hearing echoes of children's laughter as if they were still playing in the yard, or imagining the sound of their footsteps on the stairs. And sometimes, when the ache grew too heavy, tears would slip down my cheeks, but the steady back and forth of the chair seemed to cradle me like I had once cradled my babies, reminding me that life moves in rhythms, that joy and sorrow come and go like tides, and I learned to let the chair carry me through it all. And then came the hardest season of all, when Henry fell ill, his strength fading little by little until he was no longer the man who swung me around the kitchen or carried the children on his shoulders, but a quiet figure resting in bed, his smile growing weaker each day. And during those long months, the chair became my sanctuary, because I would sit in it after tending to him, exhausted in body and spirit, rocking to keep from breaking, whispering prayers into the night, asking God to give me strength. And sometimes I would drag the chair closer to his bedside so I could be near him as he slept, holding his hand, rocking gently, pretending that somehow the rhythm might carry him back to health, though deep down I knew it couldn't. And when he finally passed, the house felt emptier than ever before, and the only thing that seemed to hold me together was that chair, because when grief threatened to drown me, I sat in it, wrapped in Henry's old sweater, and let the chair rock me the way he used to, steady and strong, until the sobs eased and my breathing calmed. And I realized then that it wasn't just a mother's chair, it was a widow's chair too, a place where love lingered even when the person was gone, and though friends and neighbors came to offer comfort, bringing food and kind words, it was in the quiet hours alone with that chair that I truly began to heal, letting its creak remind me that life was still moving, even if mine felt like it had stopped. And slowly, day by day, I found a way to keep going, and in time, the grandchildren came, little bundles of joy who breathed life back into my quiet house. And once again the chair was filled with giggles and tiny bodies wriggling onto my lap, and oh, how my heart soared to rock them the way I had rocked their parents, to sing the same lullabies, to feel the same comfort of little heads resting on my chest. And it felt as though the chair itself had been waiting for that, for new laughter to soak into its wood, for new memories to be born. And it gave me such comfort to know the cycle was continuing, that love was moving forward through generations. And yet, even with all that joy, there were evenings when the quiet returned, when the children went home and the house settled back into stillness. And in those moments, the chair was my companion once more, steady and familiar, carrying me through the waves of both joy and grief, of presence and absence. And I sometimes think the chair knew me better than anyone, for it had held me in every season, young and uncertain, middle-aged and weary, older and grieving, and now simply enduring. And that's why, when my children decided it was time for me to leave the big house and move into a smaller place, I clung to that chair more than anything else, because it wasn't just furniture. It was my history, my comfort, my silent friend. And though they called it old and worn out, I knew it still held strength, because it had carried me through every trial and joy of my life, and I hoped somehow that they would understand what it meant to me, though perhaps they never truly could until they've lived long enough to know what it means to have something that has walked with you through all your days. I still remember the day of the move as clearly as if it were yesterday, the way the morning sun came through the curtains of my old house for the last time, casting long golden stripes across the wooden floor, and how the air felt heavier than usual, as though the walls themselves knew we were saying goodbye. And I walked slowly through each room, touching the furniture, the windowsills, even the door frames, like I was trying to hold onto every bit of the life we had built there. And though I tried to keep my composure for the sake of my children, my heart was breaking, because you can never really pack up a lifetime into boxes, no matter how carefully you try. And I had been told again and again that moving to a smaller place would be better, that would be easier for me, safer for me, more practical for my age. And maybe all of that was true, but what they didn't understand was that a house is more than just walls. It is memories, and every corner of that home held a piece of me, especially the living room where my rocking chair sat by the window, its wood worn smooth from decades of use. And as the movers bustled in, lifting and carrying, wrapping things in blankets, I kept glancing at that chair, telling myself I would make sure it came with me, because more than the dining table or the heavy dresser, it was the one thing I could not part with. But in the flurry of activity, decisions were made quickly, and my children kept saying, "Mom, you don't need that old chair. It's too worn, it won't fit in the apartment, we'll get you a new one." And I wanted to argue, to tell them that no new chair could ever replace it, that it wasn't about looks or comfort, but about everything it held inside its wood. But the words caught in my throat, because sometimes when you get older you learn to swallow your protests, to keep peace instead of stirring up arguments. And so I stood quietly by the door, watching as they lifted my chair, my faithful companion of so many years, and carried it out as if it were nothing more than another piece of furniture. And I can still see the way its curved arms looked as it disappeared down the steps, how the sunlight caught on its worn seat. And in that moment I wanted to cry out, to say, "Please leave it! Don't take it, you don't know what you're doing." But instead I just pressed my lips together and let them go, and the sound of its creak seemed to echo in my ears even as the moving truck door slammed shut, a sound that had always comforted me, now replaced by the clatter of boxes and the shuffle of strangers' footsteps. And I felt like a part of me was being carried away too, something so deeply tied to my life that its absence left a hollow space inside me. And as I rode in the car behind the truck, watching my house grow smaller in the rearview mirror, I tried to be strong, tried to tell myself that memories don't live in chairs or walls, they live in hearts. But oh, how hard it was to believe that in the moment, when I could already feel the ache of loss pressing down on me. And when we arrived at the apartment, a tidy little place with white walls and clean floors, I forced a smile for my children's sake, nodding as they unpacked boxes and set up new furniture, their voices bright and cheerful, saying things like, "Doesn't this feel cozy, Mom? Won't it be nice to have less to take care of?" And I nodded because I didn't want to dampen their joy, but inside, every time I glanced at the corner by the window, the place where my rocking chair should have been, my chest tightened, and though they had bought me a new chair, shiny and sturdy, it felt cold beneath me, lifeless, without the warmth of memory, and I sat stiffly in it, unable to find the rhythm I had known for so long, as if the chair itself rejected me, or perhaps I rejected it because my body remembered the feel of the old one, the way it curved to fit me, the way it creaked like a lullaby, and this new one was silent, foreign, empty. And that first night in the apartment, after the children left and the room settled into stillness, I sat in that unfamiliar chair and let the tears come, silent at first, then heavy and unstoppable, because I realized then that the chair was truly gone, not stored away, not waiting for me, but gone. And though I tried to console myself with the thought that memories cannot be stolen, the grief was real, the loss was real, because that chair had been a witness to my entire life, and I couldn't help but feel that in giving it up, I had let go of something sacred, something I should have fought harder to keep. And yet, as the days passed, I began to notice something. I would close my eyes, and even without the chair, the rhythm was still inside me. The sway of countless nights spent rocking, the sound of creaking wood, the weight of babies in my arms, the touch of Henry's hand on mine. And I realized that though they had taken the chair, they hadn't taken the memories. They couldn't, because those belonged to me, etched so deeply into my heart that no moving truck or careless word could ever remove them. And so slowly I began to sit by the window in my apartment, not in my old rocking chair, but in whatever seat was there, closing my eyes and letting the memories wash over me. And I learned that while the wood and the fabric might be gone, The life I had lived in that chair was mine forever, untouchable, unshakable. And in that truth, I found just enough comfort to keep going. Life in the new apartment took some getting used to, and though the walls were clean and the space was bright, I felt like a stranger there for the longest time, because after so many years in one house, filled with the sounds and smells of my family, it was strange to wake up in a place where the walls held no history, no echoes of laughter or whispered conversations. And every morning when I opened my eyes, for just a second I would forget where I was and expect to hear the creak of the old house settling or the hum of the furnace that always rattled in the winter. And then I'd remember. And the weight of that remembering sat heavy on me, and most of all, it was the absence of my rocking chair that made this new place feel emptier than it really was, because though my children had set up a neat little sitting area with a brand new chair and a small rug, the spot by the window looked wrong without the familiar curves of my old companion, and each evening I found myself drawn there. Anyway, sitting stiffly in the new chair, trying to rock but finding no comfort in its silence, because the rhythm was too smooth, too new, without the gentle creak that had kept me company through decades of living. And so I began to do something I hadn't done much before. I closed my eyes and let my mind wander back to the days when that chair was full of life, and in those quiet evenings, memories came to me more vividly than ever, as if the chair itself had left them behind as gifts, tucked away in my heart, waiting for me to unwrap them when I needed them most, and I would see Henry again, sitting across from me with a smile in his tired eyes, or I'd feel the weight of baby Mary in my arms, her breath soft against my neck, or hear David strumming his guitar while I rocked. And though the chair was gone, the memories came alive so strongly that for a moment I could almost believe it was still beneath me, holding me steady. And little by little I learned to let those memories carry me instead of the wood and nails, because while objects can be lost, moments cannot. And one evening, as I sat by the window with the city lights twinkling outside, I realized that maybe this was what it meant to grow older, not to cling to things, but to learn how to live in the space where memories and present life meet, to let the heart be the rocking chair, carrying all the rhythms of love that came before. And I began to find a certain peace in that, though it wasn't easy, because there were still nights when the ache hit me hard, when I longed to lay my hand on that worn armrest, to trace the little nicks and scratches made by years of children climbing in and out. And sometimes I even dreamed of it, the familiar creak filling my sleep until I woke up reaching for something that wasn't there. But instead of letting those dreams break me, I started to treat them as visits, as gifts, reminders that though the chair was gone, it had left behind something lasting. And soon I noticed that my grandchildren, when they visited me in the apartment, didn't care about what chair I had. They just wanted to climb onto my lap and listen to my stories. And as I held them, I felt the same warmth, the same comfort, and I thought to myself, perhaps love doesn't need a chair to hold it. Perhaps love just needs arms and time and patience. And that realization softened the loss little by little, like waves smoothing a stone. And I even found myself telling them stories about the old rocking chair, about how their mother and uncle were once rocked to sleep in it, about the countless nights it kept me company, and they would listen wide-eyed, as if the chair were a character in a fairy tale. And in those moments I felt a kind of joy, knowing that even if the chair itself was gone, its story lived on, passed down to little ones who might one day tell it again. And that thought made me smile, because it meant the chair wasn't truly gone. It had simply moved from wood into words, from furniture into memory. And as I sat there one evening, the sun setting pink across the Michigan sky outside my window, I realized that perhaps I had misunderstood loss all along, because it wasn't about what was taken away, it was about what remained. And though the movers had carried off my rocking chair, they hadn't taken the love it cradled, the comfort it gave, or the strength it taught me. And those things were now woven into me, inseparable, unshakable, and so I began to look at my life not as missing something, but as carrying it within me. And in that shift, I found peace, a quiet kind of peace that comes not from holding on to the past, but from realizing it is already inside you, safe forever. Now that I sit here, years after leaving the house and the old chair behind, I can honestly say that what once felt like a heavy loss has turned into something far gentler, something almost beautiful, because I have come to understand that life is not measured by the things we manage to keep, but by the love and memories we carry forward. And the truth is, no one can take those from us, not even time itself. And while I once thought my rocking chair was the anchor that held all my years together, I realize now it was simply the doorway, the vessel that allowed me to gather those memories. But the real treasures were always inside me, waiting for me to notice, and in this small apartment, sitting by the wide window where the Michigan sky changes its colors each evening, I find myself at peace, because though the chair is gone, the warmth of the life I lived is still with me, alive in every story I tell, every smile I give, and every tear I wipe away. And more than that, I've come to see how my memories keep spreading, like ripples in water, touching the lives of my children and grandchildren, who may not remember the chair itself, but who carry the love that was poured into them while I rocked. And that, to me, is the greatest comfort of all, because it means the story doesn't end with me. It continues on through them, in the way my daughter hums to her own children when they are restless, or the way my son tells his kids about the songs I used to sing in that very chair. And when my grandchildren climb onto my lap, even now, in whatever chair is near, they don't seem to notice what I'm sitting on. They only notice that I am there, that my arms are open, and my stories are waiting. And that has taught me that love doesn't need the perfect place or the perfect object to shine. It shines simply because it exists. And as I think back on all the seasons of my life, I no longer feel the sting of what I lost, but the blessing of what I gained. For the chair gave me years of comfort, but my memories give me eternity. And perhaps that is why I smile more these days, because instead of mourning what is gone, I am grateful for what was given. And I carry that gratitude with me like a lamp in the dark, lighting the path of my days. And sometimes when the evening light softens and I hear the faintest creak in the building or the rustle of the wind, I let myself believe, just for a second, that my rocking chair is still with me in spirit, gently rocking me not with wood, but with love. And that thought makes me laugh quietly to myself, because I know now that the heart is the strongest rocking chair of all, steady, unbroken, and always carrying me forward. And if there is one lesson I wish to leave behind, it is this: don't be afraid when life asks you to let go of something dear, because what truly matters will never leave you. It will live inside you and travel with you wherever you go. And as I watch the sun setting over Michigan tonight, painting the sky, with colors so breathtaking they remind me of a quilt stitched by God's own hands, I whisper a quiet thank you to the chair, to the years, to the people I have loved and lost, and to the memories that are still with me, holding me closer than any piece of furniture ever could. And in that moment, I feel light, I feel whole, and I know with certainty that though they took my rocking chair, they did not take my joy, they did not take my hope, and they did not take my memories. And with those gifts, I will keep on rocking in my heart, peacefully, lovingly, until my very last day.